So I just activated the live stream, so we are now live streaming. And admit everyone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Give everybody a minute to get in, get their audio connected. I realized that I've seen so many of you so frequently and have met so few in person. Okay. I am going to go ahead and call the meeting to order at 7:04 p.m. And before we start, I just wanted to say something briefly. This evening, I was informed of yet another piece of propaganda that's being mailed to all homes in Easton and Reading by an anonymous group that is determined to undermine the work of this task force. And I want to say a few things because I'm assuming that people might go back and watch this meeting once they get the mail in the next couple days. First, the point of this task force is not to tell white people they are racist. The point of this task force is not to indoctrinate anyone. In fact, that is antithetical to the work because it's about accepting and celebrating people for who they are. This committee is not organized to give anyone preferential treatment. This committee is not erasing American history or civic responsibility from the curriculum or school culture. This committee is about one thing, making sure that every student and every member of our staff and our families feel respected, included, and supported, and have the opportunity to thrive and succeed. And the reason this committee was formed is that we were told that was not happening and that we need to do better. So, do I have approval of the minutes from the April 28th, 2021 meeting?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Any discussion on that? Seeing no discussion, I will take them approved. What is them supposed to say? Approved with unanimous consent. Okay, moving on, public comment. If any members of the public would like to make a comment, raise your hand. Put your little hand up. Dana Benton.
Yeah, hi, I'll be really brief. I'm sending the committee a 6-page letter signed by about 20 people suggesting some amendments to the proposed survey language.
Thank you.
Can we have name and address for the record?
It's Dana Benson, Pond Road. I gotcha. Agnes.
Hi, Agnes Bebon, 939 Blackhawk Turnpike in Easton. Sorry, my neighbors are yelling. I always want to speak in support of the survey, and I really appreciate the work that's being done by the task force. I really hope that it can go forward. And I want to thank all the task force members for continuing their work despite the small but very vocal group in Easton trying to derail this work. It means a lot to students who are marginalized and a lot of the young alumni and current students who really do want to see these types of changes in the school. So I just wanted to speak in support of the survey. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Randy.
Thank you, Heather. Appreciate it. I'll just get something here because I made a little prepared comment here. So Randy Hicks, Brianna Lane, I don't know if we're writing that down, but in Easton. I'll start by paraphrasing the famous philosopher Aristotle because that's the type of guy I am. We don't deliberate about mathematical truths or scientific laws. We deliberate about actions within our power whose consequences cannot be known with certainty. We deliberate, we discuss, and we debate ideas. It's part of our culture as Americans. We do so freely without repercussions, and we do so to derive change for the betterment of society. The DEI Initiative Task Force has proponents and opponents, and true to our culture, both sides, pro and con, have the opportunity to be heard, to initiate change, but more important, to bring lasting change. We deliberate to reach compromises and consensus. I've shared my comments on the survey with a committee member, and I truly hope my comments will be considered. And I'd just like to share one comment with you tonight. Questions 11 and 17 ask a student if they've ever felt uncomfortable, embarrassed, or humiliated. These are three very different standards. A PE teacher may encourage a student to participate in PE class, and the student may become uncomfortable. A teacher may reprimand a student for talking to their friend during class, and the student may become embarrassed. Frankly, these events could be a weekly occurrence for some. They were for me. Humiliated is a much more extreme event. And so my recommendation on these particular questions is to rewrite them as 3 questions, or potentially provide the student with an opportunity to explain, or even strike the question and work within question 15. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Robert Santangeli, you could state your address, please.
Yes, hi, 55 Honeysuckle Hill Lane. I would just off the cuff, in support of, there are those who oppose the ideology behind the task force. And I know you gave some comments on what you believe the task force, the intent of the task force, but I did read Mr. Harrison's article as well, and there were several things, not knowing, I thought, it was right to give it an opportunity and look at what was proposed for for the purpose of the task force. And there were several goals, some of which are, I think we all agree with: supporting students and opportunity. I think we can all get behind that all the students in the schools should be supported equally. There were other things that are really ideological. They're political and they're divisive, I feel, like social and emotional learning. I'm not sure why the Board of Ed thinks it's appropriate for you to teach our children these things that are parental duties, quite frankly, and it's an intrusion. Even talk about space for voices in middle school. These children don't need voices in middle school. They need academics, they need education, and they need to rely on their parents to support them, which I would argue in this town is probably, 98% of the time is there for them, that support structure. But we're all supportive. We're not, despite comments to the contrary, that doesn't make us racist. It doesn't make us not supportive of equality. We can see the divisiveness that this causes even within the community, and that the contrary of what you think. And I think I do believe it comes from a good place, that we want to help those. I think that's true, and we all agree with that. Myself, and I think others, just believe this is completely the wrong way to go about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agnes, did you still have your hand up? Did you have an additional public comment? Or is that?
I had an additional public comment. Yeah, I just wanted to say that to speak to their children, they also are very important in this. Sorry, I think my sound is doing something weird. But making sure that schools are a safe environment for all students is super important. And I think that this survey is a really important first step in making sure that our schools are safe for all children. I also don't think that it's fair to put the onus of this on parents completely, especially when it comes to new research and things like that.
Great, thank you so much. I saw Ann Mineski. You could state your address, please.
Good evening, Amanuski, 20 Morning Glory, Easton. I am a critic of DEI and what is being, you're surprised that what is going on is this is a Hegelian dialectic that was dropped upon our school and our town. It's inorganic, and I'm concerned with the fact that children are being manipulated. I'm concerned with the knowledge that I have that schools have been slowly incrementalizing data collection, so that the real, when we get down to brass tacks, it is taking the data, what this being proposed as is one thing, and taking the children's data is another. And as a parent who had my children at Discovery Magnet and who found out that Bill Gates and his group were working with Bridgeport on they call it something else over there. I had at the annual meeting, but it's SEL. CASEL, CASEL, they refer to it. So they want to collect the data on the children over there. And I made a fuss and said no, because my rights, my children. And I think that parents all need to be very aware of what is the actual actions, what is the intent. And the children are being manipulated to think that it's one thing and that it has a positive point. But if you really think about it, the Civil Rights Act of 1969 or 1965 made us all equal. And I question why Joe Barlow High School and our district has not had enough equality materials in the curriculum. Thank you.
Okay, somebody named Jenny had their hand raised.
Heather, I have a comment that was emailed to us today by someone. Is that allowed?
Oh, yeah. I didn't see that it was you. I know who you are.
Sorry. This is from Debbie Bear, 8 Hayes Street, Easton. She says, one of the lessons of the pandemic has been all about connectivity, finding new ways to communicate, to be productive and successful at work and at school, to keep in touch with loved ones no matter where they live. Going forward, we will learn the advantages of connectivity, but only if we know how to connect with everyone. The survey will help us understand how best to address these issues. For our children, that means an education in diversity, equity, and inclusion. The fact that so many people in Easton are against DEI is exactly why we need it. Obviously, many parents in town won't teach their children the benefits of new and different perspectives. What kind of example is that? That it's not important and it's even harmful to learn about other cultures, other races, other points of view, and to fear them? As some of our Barlow graduates have already stated, they were unprepared to enter a diverse world. This must not continue. We owe it to them to prepare them for success. They're not going to stay in Easton all their lives. They won't live in a bubble. Let's give them everything they need to make moral choices with integrity, with tools to face challenges, and with open hearts so they may make Easton, Reading, and indeed the whole world a healthier place for all kinds of people, even those who are afraid to welcome diversity, live with equity, and enjoy the richness offered by inclusion.
Thank you. Dave, 2.
I think it's Tracy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I don't know who I logged in as, but hi, I'm in the middle of doing bedtime and jumped on here late, but I just wanted to say I'm in full support of the DEI efforts of this task force. And there's my daughter. I can't be quite eloquent right now, but I'm in full support of the survey. I don't think there's anything to be scared of in collecting data, nor is there any reason to not give middle schoolers voices. I think that's kind of a crucial part of education, to give them voices about themselves and the world around them, if we're going to prepare them for that world. And I think age-appropriate DEI curriculum should not be political, and it should just be a given. It's the 21st century, and we need to prepare our children to make a better world. So thank you. I will return to bedtime now. Oh, my street, Morning Glory Lane in Easton. Sorry, thanks.
Sorry, what's your name?
Tracy Carlucci, Carlucci.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Sarah Odell.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather. Sarah Odell from 214 Black Rock Turnpike in Reading. I just wanted to reiterate my support for the survey. I have an incoming middle schooler at John Reed for next year, and having reviewed the questions being asked, as a parent who actually has kids of this age and actually has students in school today, I can tell you that these are questions that our kids are not going to be shocked by. And I definitely support seeing this on the survey as it goes out. It's important to know this information and to be able to support all of our students. And this is really about supporting the students. It's not about parents wanting to enforce some political agenda on things. It's about supporting the students in our school system. And this is really what we need to be doing. And I applaud the committee for doing the work. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other additional public comment? Public comment. I don't see anyone. Okay, so next is task force member comment. And I'm going to start by welcoming Jenny Cheetah, who is a new Easton Board of Education representative. Thank you so much. We are lucky and happy to have you. And I hope that you'll find this as fun and enriching as I have. Fun is maybe a weird word, but okay. So any other task force member comment? John Stinson.
Heather, if I just briefly, I want to make sure to dispel any misinformation about sort of privacy. I take data privacy very seriously. It's something that I focus on. I coach kids on it. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and we are protected both by our adherence to rules that are dictated by FERPA, as well as Connecticut Public Act 16189, which is one of the sort of best student and sort of data privacy laws in the nation. It puts a lot of power in the hands of parents and students, and there will be no sort of secret data collection going on here, by Bill Gates or anybody else. I will make sure that when we say this is being collected anonymously, that will be the case.
Thank you. Beatrix Erickson.
Mute. Sorry. Can you hear me? Okay, I can hear you.
Yes.
So, first of all, I wanted to say I did go back and listen to the meeting in Easton, and for all those who participated and who spoke up, I just want to say thank you. I think it's very important for us at this time. This is a process where we have to listen to each other. Otherwise, all we're going to have is opposition, me against you. I'm not here in the business of being against anyone. I'm here to collaborate, right? So I listened to all the comments and they were very good for the most part. And I really appreciate everyone who spoke up and really spoke their heart. And in the same spirit, I hope that you will also do me the same honor of listening and speaking up. I joined this survey for two reasons. Their names are Alex and Ileana, right? My children. I joined this task force for that reason. And I also joined it for two other reasons. To make sure that doors are open where they need to be, but to also make sure that doors are not open where they do not need to be. So in that, what this survey means to me is an opportunity for those who you assume are experiencing something the way you're experiencing it, for them to actually tell you what they're truly experiencing. Because I can tell you that in a lot of ways, our journeys are similar, but in some ways, in ways that are critical, to our children and their health, in their mental health, their emotional, their psychological health, the journeys are not necessarily the same. So as I listen to you, I hope that you will be willing to listen to our voices, and not just my voice as a Black woman, but the voice of our community. And this is what this survey provides. It provides a peaceful ground for us to potentially hear of areas that need improvement. So I thank you for that.
Thank you. Christopher Parkin.
Thank you, Heather. I'm going to reserve my comments on the survey probably until next week, but I did want to respond and sort of clarify a couple of the comments with respect to social and emotional learning and the extent to which those are, have the tendency to become loaded terms that mean more than what perhaps they really mean. And so I want to read the statutory definition of social and emotional learning so that everyone's sort of on the same page with what we all mean by social and emotional learning. According to our legislature, and we are agents of the state acting locally, social and emotional learning means the process through which children and adults achieve emotional intelligence through the competencies of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. It's not a particularly controversial set of goals and expectations, and it is part of our mandate from the legislature and the State Department of Education to make that a part of what we do in our classrooms.
Thank you, Chris. Any other task force member comments? Okay, moving on. Professional development update. So we had some questions about the ongoing professional development work, who's doing that, who's receiving it, what's happening in the school this month. Dr. Pearson-Ugal, do you want to speak to that?
Sure, yeah. So I was also going to just provide the update that 7 members of the DEI task force were registered to participate in a virtual conference on May 7th that was entitled Dismantling Systemic Racism, and heard 2 keynote speakers. And I know I received some positive feedback from those who were able to participate in terms of the learning from the messages of the speakers about their own personal experiences of individuals with very different cultural backgrounds, and how hearing their perspectives really helped them think about our work in the Tri-District. So in addition to that, in terms of a PD update, at this point, there have been a number of sessions that have occurred for staff members in all 5 schools. And I would say they fall under the category of raising awareness about different forms of bias and how to provide safe learning environments for all students. In some cases, the sessions were planned based on a need within the school, meaning that a staff member came forward or a parent came forward to say, we have a student who has a particular need, and I'm not sure that staff is fully knowledgeable about how to support an individual with very specific needs. And the principal then organized professional development in collaboration with central office. Since that time, similar professional development sessions have been planned in other schools. So in particular, in Easton and in Reading, an organization by the name of Welcoming Schools has provided professional development sessions for teachers. And sorry, I'm just looking back. And Cooperative Education Services out of Trumbull, which is our RESC, provided 2 different sessions about implicit bias for Easton staff. And at Joel Barlow High School, in September, there was a session on implicit bias that was provided by an area university professor. to the staff. At Joel Barlow, there have also been a number of sessions provided by the Connecticut Center on School Change that have been aimed more at gathering more information from staff about their observations and experiences in the high school to better understand our current needs in order to plan forward, as well as providing some additional information about how to support individuals that may feel marginalized and may not necessarily feel safe and included in the school environment.
Can you tell me a little bit about how many, when you say like some certain teachers in the schools, like how many, and then what is the intention? Are they then taking the knowledge that they have back to the rest of the staff? Is there like a process in place for that?
So everything that I just explained was provided to an entire staff of the school. So that what prompted the planning of the professional development session might have been an individual staff member coming forward to say to a school principal, for example, a parent has asked for support in this particular area, and I'm just not sure I'm knowledgeable enough to guide them effectively. How can I learn? And then the principal might have organized something. And more frequently, it would be the parent reaching out to a principal, and not entirely different than one might do if a child has a particular learning need and there's an interest on the part of the parent to work collaboratively with the school so that their child's classmates can understand who they are as individuals and create a very nurturing and safe learning environment in the classroom. So while sometimes it might be prompted by a need in one classroom, the principal, again, in collaboration with central office, might say, this is really worthwhile learning, and perhaps this is something we should provide to the whole staff. So in those cases, we've provided it for the entire staff. So all the experiences I just shared, with the exception of the one most recently that just DEI task force members participated in, were for the entire staff of a school.
Question, Heather. For the trainings, I have a couple questions. How is it received by the staff? And I want to know more about any follow-up that occurred after the trainings. Was anything implemented? Was anything done differently?
Yeah, so I'd really have to go training by training to provide you that more specific information. But I can say that in some cases where one session was planned, the feedback that the staff members provided to the principal and the assistant principal was so positive and showed such an interest in learning more that another session was planned. And I participated in the first part of the second session. Give an example, it was actually at Helen Keller Middle School. And the teachers shared that based on the first session, they were thinking about the manner in which they addressed their class, for example. That sort of traditional ways that we would refer to students, boys and girls, or lining them up in a certain way. Things that I'm sure we can all remember from our own childhood, that the teachers were really thinking about how could I refer to the students as class, or by the name of the teachers, the friends, or whatever it might be, some other type of way of including all without necessarily labeling or creating two distinct groups. So that's just one example.
I have to say I attended that Friday conference. That was fantastic. I would love to see what we could do to get Anton Troyer to speak to I would love him to talk to everybody. That guy was awesome. He's Ojibwe, and he's actually got a young adult book out now, and he just had such a real world way of explaining, like when people come from a different perspectives, that they just, he had this like metaphor of like, we're all swimming in, it's like fish swimming in a fish bowl, and you can see everything except the bowl, and you think everything's fine, and then all of a sudden you bump against the bowl, and you're like, what happened? Why, like, you know, why is that person mad at me? He was really great. So thank you.
He was very interesting.
Thank you for offering us the opportunity to do that. It was also nice to connect with people doing similar stuff in other districts. Okay, is there any other comments, questions on the professional? Cheryl?
Yeah, I have a question with respect to now that all 3 district budgets are approved. Are there any particular themes with respect to professional development that we might consider in the upcoming school year, or would that be school specific, right, based on the need as described earlier?
So typically, that type of planning happens over the summer. So the administrative leadership team spends time in a work session retreat, often 2 days. And we really think about what we know about our 5 buildings, what we know about the 3 districts, and our strengths and our needs, and how that will inform our goals for the next year. So this year in particular, we've been talking a lot about phase 1 of this work and that needs assessment stage. And so I think a lot of our thinking and planning will then inform the professional development work for next year. And certainly the professional development work, it goes far beyond DEI, but as we've said in a number of our conversation, it's that lens of understanding all of our work so that we are being inclusive, right? So I can plan a professional development session for middle school ILA teachers about teaching writing or teaching reading, but they can still be thinking about how they're including all students in the language that they use and in the text that they select, et cetera. So that was a long answer to your short question, Cheryl, but typically that type of planning does happen over the summer, and that's the type of thing that we would share at the start of the year.
Thank you. Susan, you had a question?
Yes, hi. I had a question for Stephanie. As far as with the PD and the training that's taken place, for the staff that may have questions or follow up after, is there a point person for each school so that they have like guidance or someone to go to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really great question. And that's one that we've certainly discussed in this task force before, right? So currently, the most likely point of contact would be an assistant principal or a principal. And so if the teacher says, I was in this session and I'm not sure I completely understand something, or I'm not sure I agree with something, or I'm looking for more information, the person who would then have the authority to then create next steps would be the one of the administrators, one of the building leaders. Sometimes people will reach out to me, but that's sort of skipping a step. Most people will reach out to the principal.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the professional development? Devin.
Has there been any leadership training or training that is unique to school principals or school leaders that prepare them to do some of the work that you just discussed around counseling teachers or coaching teachers? Just wondering what that looks like.
Yes, I'm wondering what that looks like as well. So at this point, no, and that's certainly something that we need to discuss and we need to plan.
I'll say, Devin, just to that point, the one thing that I would add to that, and I definitely agree with Dr. Kirsten Ugel about wanting to have something formalized. We have spent time in our recent administrative council meetings incorporating discussions about diversity, equity, and inclusion, just to be able to just start framing the work and what that looks like from a leadership standpoint, and how we support the work that's happening in the building and supporting the needs of our students. I do think that, going forward, we want to make sure that we have a more formalized plan, but in laying some of the groundwork for that work, we've been doing that sort of very organically as part of our monthly meetings.
It's fairly typical for different people in leadership positions, whether it's a school leader or sometimes a content leader, to either request or be asked to attend a conference so that they become more knowledgeable in a number of areas. And
Colin is just horrible.
I think that in terms of our leadership work, we do want to be thinking about how we can really be strategic and set some clear goals so that our leaders and the point people in our building feel comfortable either responding to questions or at least directing the questions in a certain way.
Okay, was there any more discussion on the professional development front? Okay, moving on. So the process for incident reporting and resolution. It has come to my attention that Easton, Reading, and Region 9 have wildly different policies regarding reporting incidents of sexual harassment or discrimination, racial discrimination, gender discrimination or harassment. And so let me share my screen to give you guys a look at this. And one of the charges of the task force is to make recommendations. So in Region 9, these are all in the policies, the 5,000 section 5145. Region 9 has something about sexual harassment. They have a policy here that lays out, the overall the process to report something, and it's in person, and then there's you can see what I'm looking at, and you can all find these on the website. And I'll just show you. We don't have to read through all of them, but I'll just show you that Easton. This is the gender. Easton and Reading both have policies regarding gender identity and expression, transgender and gender nonconforming youth. And also the policy regarding that and sexual harassment. Pretty much all three districts have something about sexual harassment. And where is it? I know Reading has, there's Reading and Easton have a form to fill out to report incidents of sexual harassment, but there's no form for any other kind of harassment. And it seemed to me that there should be I'm scrolling through really fast. Sorry if I'm making anybody dizzy. Here it is. This is student program sexual abuse prevention opt-out form. That's a different form. Reading has a form on. They have a form for sexual harassment. Racial harassment does not have a form. It just says that you can see. It's just that there's no unified way and clearly defined way to report different forms of harassment other than sexual harassment, probably because that's gotten, I don't know what to say, the most attention, but I don't really know why that is. I'm not on the policy committee. I don't know when we did that, but there's no uniformity to any of this. And I think that from what I've heard in our discussions, there needs to be some kind of clearly defined process in place, both for reporting and for accountability and resolution. So I just wanted to, I guess, open that up for conversation. Do you need me to keep sharing these policies or can I take them down?
Just a general comment, Heather, with respect to the policies that are specific to Title IX, they are subject to ongoing rulemaking at the federal level. And so the result is sort of a changing landscape of what the expectations are. And we've recently passed, I believe in all three boards at this point, revisions to 5144.44, I think it is, the policy related to students and Title IX and the reporting structure therein, which is responsive to the regulations that were adopted during the Trump administration. And there's an expectation that the Biden administration is going to promulgate new regulations in the next year that's going to trigger another policy review of this policy. And while I agree that it would be ideal to have a single reporting structure and form for all measures of harassment and discrimination, what I worry about is what you would key that to. And if it's keyed to the Title IX structure, it's going to increase and decrease with the specificity and its expectations and its procedural safeguards over time, just like if you keyed it to any other of these things that are statutory in nature that are driven by rulemaking out of Washington. I think that the answer is probably to at least start and continue the work that we've been doing on a tri-board basis to unify the policies so that we don't have three different Title IX reporting structures and three different discrimination reporting structures, but a single uniform approach to it. And to the extent that we can align those regulations, we do so, but I would be hesitant to jump right to recommending that we do so because there's unintended consequences, because you're going to have to take the strictest of the regulations, which sometimes will conflict with mandates to be less strict about other things.
I think what I'm thinking about is more about the process rather than what is defined under a certain statute.
I'm telling you that the regulations define the process.
Okay.
Right. And they provide certain procedural safeguards to the accuser and the accused and the district and all these things. And it depends on what regulation and statute you're operating under when you do it, which is part of how this becomes a minefield.
So would there be a way to unify at least that? But how do we bring how do we provide a sort of an accountability chain and a very clearly defined way for people to talk about this stuff when it happens, so that it doesn't go.
I can see this working in sort of there's the policy basis, which is these wordy legalese policies that address all of these various regulations. And then there's the practical reality, which is I have a problem, what do I do now? And the typical person, when they say I have a problem, what do I do now, isn't going to dig through 40 pages of policies to try to figure it out. They're either going to call the building principal, the superintendent, the central office, one of us, and say, what do I do now? And the solution in my mind is probably some kind of clear, documented repository that puts certain things in plain English and is either part of handbooks on an annual basis or is posted on a central office website that says, do you have a problem? FAQ. Are you concerned about harassment? Here's the process. Are you concerned about discrimination? Here's the process. And that can incorporate the policies as they change over time, but at least translates it to plain English to people who have a concern.
I think that would make more sense. I was thinking sort of along the lines of, we have a bullying report form, right? Isn't that's on the website, and it's detailed in the handbook. But I think that we could have, because there's sometimes things that happen that don't rise to the level of bullying, but that need to be addressed. And then also, I guess I wanted to know the sort of what happens if the resolution is not to the satisfaction of the people involved. What happens then? I see Beatrix is raising her hand. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
So if I can stay in the policies just for a second, right? So Chris, completely agree with you with respect to, we don't want to divert folks that have true concerns, right, to policies that they may not understand, or too lengthy or hard to navigate and are inconsistent across the 5 schools. But is there anything that, in terms of the current policies that exist right now, that the policy committee is working on that where the process is not necessarily spelled out in the policy? so again, not looking for a wholesale change, but let's just take the racial policy, for example, right? That one was one that did not have a reporting form, in contrast with the sexual harassment ones, which one can guess it's probably linked to federal law or whatever. You're the attorney, but but I'm saying, is there something that, at least for with respect to the statute, where we can be more specific or provide a form for the policy, for all of the policies that do exist?
So there's sort of a layered answer to that. The first of which is that the way that the policy committee has gone about its sort of grand review has been guided by certain principles, including, bluntly, keep it simple, stupid, which involves taking out regulations and forms where we see them, because largely they are not driven by mandate to have a form in a particular format. We're just required to collect certain information to meet certain regulatory obligations. And so we've been deferring to the administration to create and maintain those forms so that we don't run into a conflict where the administration one day designs a form that is in conflict with something that we've passed, and we have to take it to 3 meetings to pass it and all that fun stuff. So that's on the sort of practical perspective, the way that we're going about that process. But I do think that it makes all the sense in the world to get to a point where the administration is publishing in one particular place all of those forms and all of that sort of reporting structure. And right now, in the regular course of the policy committee work, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're somewhere at the beginning of the 4,000 series in our global review. And the student policies that Heather is sharing is in the 5,000 series, which we'll get to as soon as we can.
I think we're actually towards the end of the 4,000s, so almost ready to get to the 5s.
So can I just jump in for a second? Because I do think there's sort of 2 different situations that I'm thinking of. So one would have to do with reporting an incident or making an allegation that there has been an act of harassment or a violation of one of our policies, and sort of bullying and Title IX come to mind because those are very heavily regulated processes that we have in place in all the schools. But I'm also thinking about some of our conversations around things that might occur perhaps at the classroom level, between students, between teacher and students, that show more just a lack of understanding or sensitivity. So in those cases, you want people to be able to, you're not necessarily reporting because you're looking for disciplinary action to occur, but it's more about, I want to raise awareness. And so how can we learn from those situations as they arise, and how might they be reported, and to whom? So I think that would be worth thinking about as well, because a lot of these forms, the forms that you referred to, I mean, that would trigger an investigation, and that's absolutely our responsibility, and we take that very seriously. But to me, it's a little bit different than a more nuanced situation that might occur as well.
I think, Stephanie, we've had those conversations in the task force a lot of times where, somebody could say their perception of something that happened, that they recognize something that happened from one perspective, and even the teacher just doesn't see it that way. I see Beatrix has had her hand up.
Am I muted or
Nope.
Unmuted? Okay. So this is something that I brought up at every one of these meetings, and it is a big concern in my heart, because to me, it's like, what is the point of all the work that we're doing if at the end of the day, the people who we say we're doing this work to make sure they feel included and protected, respected, welcomed, and are given the same opportunities, if they are not feeling that they are heard when they say this? So let's say, I hate to use the word microaggression because it almost seems like it's a very active, deliberate act. And I've only been in the school system here for 2 years. And I can tell you, like, I personally have not had to deal with that type. What I've had from our educators are people who truly have a heart for our students and want to do their best. But it's kind of like me and my Norwegian husband, sometimes we stumble into our cultures. And then we need a safe space to sort of untangle and understand where we misstepped. right? So I think there has to be a lot of grace extended to this situation. And I, for one, am very open to that, and I'm willing to do that. And I hope that those who've run into me have said, I've done that. But there are those instances that occur. Right now, as I understand it, I'm lucky that I haven't had to deal with this on the level that a lot of other families in marginalized groups have had to deal with it. But my understanding, as I've heard of some of the other situations that have taken place, is a situation, one of these stumbling issues happens. The teacher means well, but doesn't understand that they did something that caused that child or that family to not feel safe having that child in that classroom, right? So then the family talks to the teacher then says, no, that's not what I meant. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that that family still feels good about this or safe sending their children back in. So then they take it up perhaps to the principal. The principal also says, no, that's not what happened. Okay, that's one version, which is another reason why I volunteered to be part of this committee and to help draft the survey, because we do have these instances where one person is feeling one thing, but the school is saying something completely different. And you know what? If at the end of all this, we don't have some kind of a system in place to walk both sides through this process, not in a way that hurts the teacher, but that becomes a learning opportunity and a healing opportunity for everyone. And I sound like I'm in Woodstock, but I'm not that person, but I'm just really trying to walk you through this. But if we don't have that, then this is just a ginormous checkoff list of things that ER9 can say, yeah, we did that. This is happening today. It's happening now. It's happening on a regular basis. We need to address these issues. And it's not pitting parent against teacher, because, again, I don't speak for anyone else's experience, but I will speak up for our teachers and say their hearts are for our kids. Their hearts are for my kids. But like me being of Haitian background and my husband of Norwegian backgrounds, yeah, we stumble into our cultures all the time. And with no negative intent meant, but we just need to learn and understand from each other and grow from that point. Sorry, I get passionate, so go ahead.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Dana.
I just wanted to, well, first of all, thank Beatrice for that as a teacher in one of the schools, in that I agree, and it's got to be on both ends, because we have so many changes so fast. I've been doing this 18 years, even in the last 5 years, in just our understanding of all different communities and to understand that we also make mistakes and that happens, and to not always feel like we're doing something wrong would be helpful on both ends. This is a learning process. I'll be the first, and I have a lot of experience in diversity, equity. And I have a lot of background in it, but we're still learning. And so I appreciate, what you said, Beatrice, and that it's got to be for both parties too, and an understanding that we're going to make mistakes and we want to learn. We are trying. That was it.
So there's kind of two things going on, right? There's a need for a clear. Chris, I liked what you said about having something like on the website, like, do you have a problem? Because these aren't things that would rise to the level of bullying, where you want a disciplinary. So they might be. So there should be something for that. But then also, like, there's a miscommunication happening that it needs almost like a mediator,
And Heather, to Stephanie's point, even to the extent we have forms that exist, there's a risk that folks are going to see, well, this is the only form, I'm going to fill it out. And that triggers a heightened level of investigation that we probably don't need in a lot of these circumstances where we're trying to resolve issues that aren't really the issues that the forms are designed to resolve.
I like how B described it as cultures stumbling into each other. Dr. Harrison.
So, yeah, I mean, I really appreciate the whole conversation. And I think that there are some really nice opportunities here for us to utilize and enhance some of the structures that we already have in place. So, and really play connect the dots, right? So there's been a lot of work in our K-8 schools around restorative practices over the last number of years. Which is typically thought of as doing some conflict resolution with students, but it's not just about students. I mean, it could be a really good framework for unpacking. I like Beatrix's phrase of cultures bumping into each other. That bumping into that, like that's actually a nice framework already in place to unpack some of that. So I think that there's an opportunity there. Heather, you already mentioned some of the forms or focus on bullying. So with bullying and with Title IX, those two kind of statutory requirements, there are it's so explicit in the steps. Like, here's the first step, here's the next step. Here's when the complainant would get a response back from administration as far as what the next steps are. There are timelines, and it's really clear. There's also a really clear process for an appeal, right? Like an appeal process. So I think that there's an opportunity for us, even if we're not kind of aligning them so that they're the same exact process, but just using how explicitly that's laid out as kind of a way to say, you know, here, this might be a good opportunity for us to be really explicit in what the expectations are. And then the last thing I would say is, I think all of this, particularly the part that we're talking about a student experiencing some form of harassment and being able to report that and having assurances that there's follow through. I think that really falls under the Safe Schools Climate Committee. And I was just looking at some of the documentation that we have on our websites related to the Safe Schools Committee. Darlene Wallen, who is the chair of that committee for the tri-districts, is also a member of this task force. So I think there's an opportunity for a natural tie-in. That information is needs to be updated. I don't know that there was any updating that happened to that information that goes out and that's available on the website during this year. It's dated 2019-20. So it could be a part of that updating that we think about being more explicit in how that's documented. In thinking about this topic, someone shared with me a school in Massachusetts, a school district that has all of this on their website, and it's really nicely laid out. I think it could be a nice example for the Safe Schools or Safe School Climate Committee to be able to look at that as kind of an example. And then also, again, just look at what are some other districts doing in this area to be really explicit about how we respond and what the reporting process looks like. I think I'd really like to look at it in two buckets. So to Chris's point, kind of thinking about it from a policy standpoint, but also thinking about the practical standpoint about how we respond as administrators.
But then there's the other part of it, which is like the sort of the kind of mediation of when something's not like risen to the level of, I'm going to fill out this form and I want an investigation. You know, it's like I mean, we had this kind of conversation, I think it was last month or the month before, about the idea of having like somebody in each building who was like trained as like a safe or like a trained in that kind of like, I always think of it as like translation, you know, like, oh, you don't think that this person has anything to be mad about, but this is why this person's mad. And this is what, like, this is how it was received, even though that wasn't how you intended it. And like to sort of facilitate those safe discussions, almost like restorative practices among like parents and teachers, right?
Yes. So we actually talked about that for the last two meetings.
Yeah.
After the first meeting, I think I mentioned that I had given some thought to that, and I had sort of sketched out some ideas related to that. I actually have it in my office, sort of laid out as a framework, and did some work with, reached out to some colleagues that I worked with in other places to just kind of vet, like, you know, does this make sense? Does this seem like it would be kind of a nice package? I also have done some digging and looking at potential training with, I started off the sentence with the agency in my head and now I lost it. Equal opportunity schools, that they mostly do work with high schools, but I was talking with their new executive director, and this is a national group that does really impactful work. I was talking with their executive director recently about some modules that they do that I think could be a nice space for this, a nice opportunity for us going forward. And Dr. Pearson-Ugel and I had some discussion about identifying one or two people in each school that we could, you know, volunteers to go through this level of training so that they could be kind of the resident sort of translator in their schools, so that there's that skill set there. I see that really as important, and but then also kind of the next layer of training. And I just want to make sure that we have the basics covered as well, right? So just in thinking about how to prioritize that work, I think that that's definitely something that I'm looking forward to putting in place next year as we're thinking about the bigger picture of professional learning.
And I think, B, did you have your hand up again?
I did. And again, forgive me, but this will be the last thing I say about it. You know, I know we talked about the forum, and the reason that I go back to that is, to me, this is a space where that's an opportunity where a teacher can say, you know, I had an interaction. I'm not I don't know that I'm comfortable with how this turned out. Or a parent, on the other hand, can say, okay, I talked to the teacher. I wasn't necessarily comfortable about it. And, you know, and to me, it's like, these are the things that are happening regularly in the classroom. These are the life things that are happening. To me, you know, I believe in professional development, but these incidences, if we are I hate to say document because it sounds like it's against someone, and I don't mean for it to be against anyone. It's just instances. If these situations can be quantified in some way, that is, to me, is the best professional development, right? You don't have to put names or say who the teachers are, but if we have instances like this that are recorded, it could be from the teacher, from the principal, or from the family itself, saying this situation happened and I'm not comfortable with the outcome, or I'm not comfortable with some aspect of it. That's professional development. To me, that's the most important aspect of it. That's the part that all the teachers can be getting to make sure that these types of incidences are reduced. That is the true aspect. You can bring on all the experts you want. You can take all the classes you want, but at the end of the day, it's, you know, foot to the rubber. What does it look like? And for me as a parent, I'm all about the foot to the rubber. What does it look like for my child in that classroom when the door is closed? Right? And so, and we know that these instances are happening. And to me, that's the best. These case studies, these can become case studies of where thought is given into it and presented to our teachers as best case scenarios, what went wrong, what went right. You don't have to point at the teacher, you don't have to point at the student, you don't have to put at the parent, but this is like the best way to learn and to make sure that we're creating safe spaces for our students. That's it.
Thank you. And I mean, I do think that like if there was a process in place for like if you, I mean, obviously the first step would be to have a conversation with the teacher, and then if it's not resolved, then this other step that we're talking about would get triggered, and then there would be some, I would assume, some documentation of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And let me just say, like, I know you mentioned earlier policies for bullying. I don't even want anyone thinking of it in that light, because the policy for bullying assumes an aggressive act. And that's not the land that we're talking about. The work of this committee is obviously to address those, but to also make sure that where the majority of the discomfort happens, that we're addressing that part of it. And again, I call that sort of like maybe culture stumbling into each other, extending a lot of grace to each other. But that's where, if we address that, then we eliminated getting kicked up to the bullying level.
Right, yeah. This is like, hopefully it would be a conversation where everybody comes away feeling a little bit better and understanding each other a little more and learning.
Exactly.
Yeah. Dana, did you have your hand up again?
Yeah, but it was about what we were talking about like 10 minutes ago when we were talking about things, putting out the policies and things for public. And it made me think of the standards and things, curriculum work we're doing right now, and that we present the standards that are the state standards, but we also present like I can statements that are normal kids and parents. I can do this by the end of this unit versus just the state standard. It's almost kind of the same thing where you have the legal, but you also have the I can type of statement. Just made me think of that, but we've gone so far since then.
Jenny, I saw you had your hand up.
Sorry, I can't find the little hand thingy to put the symbol on there. First of all, thank you for your welcome before. That was so kind, and I really appreciate it. All I wanted to say, just the very first thing that you mentioned about consistency, you know, in certain processes, but I guess I'm also thinking about the differences between each of the buildings too, you know, and that each town has differences, and each elementary and middle school and high school, and just that our building administrators, I think, I'm sure that Dr. Pearson-Ugal and Dr. Harrison are including them in these conversations, but I feel like they would really be the people to speak to the best way to go about pulling out these instances that you're talking about that aren't necessarily sexual harassment or something that would rise to the level of any kind of really high level action or involvement. Kind of like the people in their buildings that would be best suited to do that. Maybe we leverage our social workers and school psychologists in terms of, you know, including them in the discussions about the best process, the best way to go about getting the most open involvement from people, you know, in times where it might be a really touchy conversation. That's all.
Yeah, that's a good idea. In terms of like the policies, it just sort of surprised me that each district had like, some had the same district, some didn't even have anything about that at all. And it was just like, everybody had.
You've been on the board long enough, it shouldn't surprise you.
It's
I'm
been
going to come to that policy
been
meeting.
over a year that me and 2 lawyers have been meeting every week.
There's your problem. You need to put some.
You're saying John's the problem?
No, the lawyers.
All right, I'm out.
The lawyers. You're used to getting paid by the hour.
No, Chris and Maureen are quite efficient.
I know. Devin.
I just wanted to throw out that I just really like the idea that as we continue to build capacity, this isn't about punishment. This is about learning for everyone, and thinking about ways to increase conversation, especially in when things happen, when our cultures collide or bump up against each other in a way that causes one side to have an perceived impact or perceived intent that could be negatively impactful. So that I think this is really important. And I know we have two teachers on here who are just amazing and have shared, all of their learnings, and that I think our teachers really are here because they care so much about our kids, and that they, are continuing to learn and would, it sounds like very open to continuing that process. So just want to honor and thank that.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see the secret plan that you've got back at the office, Dr. Harrison. and whether or not we can monetize that and roll it out to other schools, or I guess you could. But were there any other comments about that? I mean, I guess so. What I'm hearing is that we need to have like a unified, easy way to report, like, you've got a problem, and then we'll be developing. We've got 3 weeks left of this school year, but maybe for next year, one of our charges is we have to write a list of recommendations from the task force. So perhaps this is one of the recommendations that we have learned in just having these community conversations, that this is something that's needed, that we recommend that this kind of sort of restorative practices, that with a level of accountability and documentation, be put forward before the next school year. How does everyone feel about that? I'm seeing like nods. Okay. All right. Are we moving on from this? I don't want to say that this is the end of this conversation. I think this is like the beginning, and I think that this is helpful and healthy. But so next on the agenda is a survey update, and I don't want everyone to. This is not our meeting number 4 about the surveys, but we do have some other board members here that wanted the opportunity to ask questions or get feedback, have a little discussion about our surveys. And so I can share my screen again. Okay, survey update. So the task force charge, and for the other people who are on the task force, feel free to jump in, unmute yourselves. People who were on the working group writing the committee, please jump in. We all, I feel sort of like how far back do I go, because we've talked about this so much, but so the very first thing that we were supposed to do is conduct an assessment on the state of equity, diversity, and inclusion to report it to the boards. We have held regularly scheduled meetings, and we're going to establish annual and multi-year goals. That's like a next step, sort of baby step, because we're still conducting the assessment of our strengths and weaknesses. And part of that, we first started talking about that in terms of focus groups, because that's how other districts have done this. You start having community conversations, talking to each other. What do we need? What is your experience? What is your experience? And that also fosters a real level of community among people where we listen to each other. But obviously, because of COVID, and because this is a committee of the Board of Education, we're bound by rules that say we have to have all our meetings in public. So you can invite people to have like a very private and confidential, safe conversation among a small group of people, even though these meetings have been very, people have been very, very honest and open with their experiences and their thoughts and feelings. And I so appreciate that, because that's incredibly brave, no matter what side you're coming at this from. So why do we survey? We want to better understand the educational experience of our middle school and high school students. What's going on with them? How are they feeling? The survey provides a metric that we can measure against. Are we doing better? Next year, are we having fewer incidents of things being reported? Are people saying like, yeah, I feel great in my school? It's entirely possible that we could get these surveys filled out and everybody's like super happy. And we have a big, celebration of our success. So there's not like an anticipation. We're not looking for a problem, but we have heard that we have some things that we can do better. So this is a measure of all different kinds of diversities: race and ethnicity, physical and mental ableness, sexual orientation, political diversity, religion, gender, and social isolation and exclusion are some of the things that were brought up in meetings and discussions with members and also members of the community. As John mentioned, this is the privacy information. These are going to be parents will get an email. They can say, yeah, go ahead, send it to me and I'll give it to my kid. Or people can opt out of it. You can do some questions and not answer other questions. So that is that. So do we have, I guess, do we want to open it up to what the questions are from?
If I can just start by saying thank you, that was really nice to sort of have that summary. I think I've just heard a lot of different concerns, whether it's in public comment or from board members, and I think they're genuine. Hey, I'm concerned about this, concerned about that. Let's not make this mistake. Let's not make that mistake. And I think it's really helpful to clearly state this is what it is. This is what the purpose is. And to get everybody on the same page about like what it is that we're trying to do. I think everyone here, we're here because we support a safe, diverse, inclusive community. And, there's no ulterior motive here. There's no secret agenda. We're really just trying to make sure that we can do the best for the kids.
Does anyone, how do I do, I guess I should keep sharing my screen, but now everybody can see themselves. Do any of the board members, the questions that I've received, the comments are slight tweaking of words, things like instead of saying I feel unable to speak up in class, it was recommended by Chris Hawker that we say I feel reluctant to speak up in class. I think that's a good suggestion. Two people mentioned that they felt that the order, one of the questions, the order that we presented it seemed a little bit skewed to imply that there was a bias in some regard. So they suggested, I think Colleen Pilato and Chris Hawker suggested flipping those. I think those are all really good suggestions. Anytime you write a survey, you think like, I know the working group, you guys can speak up also. Like we tried to read it from so many different perspectives. Like how is somebody who's like, feels like this gonna read this?
Can we respond to Randy's suggestion? Because it seems, I actually think he's making a good point there. And I don't want to offend anybody who worked hard on the survey, but I think, it's like getting it to a point where the statement is meaningful. When somebody says, yeah, I agree, that it's more than maybe just embarrassed, but I don't know. I'm not an expert on sort of on those terms.
Question 11, Heather, in the middle school.
Do you want me to bring it up on the surveys?
If you have it, yeah, that'd be great.
I think it might be valuable to hear from some folks who are in the classroom too, as to how students traditionally verbalize these concerns, or to the extent they can or do, what the language they use is.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, here we go. I don't often do presentations in my normal life. And was it 11 and 17 on a specific?
It's in the middle school. I think it's in a couple different surveys, but it's in the middle school and high school survey, question 11 in the middle school survey.
Middle school, section 2. Okay. Let me share my screen again.
I think the concern from Randy was just that, sort of the combination of these three terms and the reasonable sort of reading of the average person being that some are softer than others, and that it may be more meaningful to sort of focus on the sort of most severe, but I don't know if that's actually sort of undermining the goal.
So go up, sorry, John, it's section 8 of 25, but question 11 if you're on the PDF.
I think we're looking at it now, right? Uncomfortable incidents?
Isn't it uncomfortable incidents with uncomfortable, embarrassed, humiliated?
No, there's a question that asks, have you felt uncomfortable, embarrassed, humiliated? And they use that term as if it's interchangeable.
Yeah, that's this one that we're looking at. Have you felt uncomfortable, embarrassed, humiliated by another student in school because of the following? I agree. Those are all different things.
Right.
And I mean, embarrassed is, I'm embarrassed every day of my life.
I live my life.
I'm uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable right now.
I think I would say one of the interesting dimensions of it is that it's because of, right, these things, right? So it's, feeling self-conscious because my hair isn't looking great today. That's not necessarily the same thing as the sort of specific things that we're talking about here. Feeling embarrassed because of your religion, I have an issue with that. Even if it's only at the level of embarrassment, or being uncomfortable, feeling uncomfortable because of ableness, like I'm super not cool with that, right?
Yeah.
If like.
Can we just take out the word uncomfortable and leave embarrassed or humiliated? Because I think what we're recognizing is that level of comfort is subjective, it's developmental. If we're giving a middle or a high school survey, the idea of being uncomfortable in one's own skin for any number of reasons, or even because of an interaction with a staff member, although it may make the student feel, I can tell you, I've made my own students probably very uncomfortable in the last week, mostly because of their responsibilities, or lack of meeting responsibilities in the classroom. I don't think I embarrassed them, but but uncomfortable is a different situation. But embarrassed and humiliated, I think, gives the connotation sort of wrongdoing, or maybe mishandling on the part of the person who's the adult, or they're sort of the responsible party for maintaining the environment.
I get that. I do hear what John is saying, though. Like, Jenny, you didn't make them feel uncomfortable. You made them feel uncomfortable because they weren't doing their work, not because of their their ethnicity or their religion.
Heather?
Yeah.
Hi. So as I'm looking at this question, right, because almost all of these, it really depends on where you are as we're saying before, in your own skin. Perhaps the better way of saying it is, have you been made to feel uncomfortable or embarrassed or humiliated? That, to me, that's much more of, this is taking how my own awkwardness out of the picture, but I've actually experienced this because of the actions or something of someone else.
It suggests a feeling that they're sensing intent,
right,
to be made feel
right, and that's really the distinguishing thing that we need from this question. It's because someone can be feeling uncomfortable, embarrassed, or humiliated in their own mind. That doesn't mean that anyone is at fault, but if you've been made to feel that way, whether it's uncomfortable, embarrassed, or humiliated, then that's an issue for us to be considering.
Yeah, I would agree with, I would suggest the word "or," because there's a progression when one experiences, whether you're a bystander to a microaggression or the recipient of one. It's a progression where the environment is foreign or something is introduced where you question the fact that you never questioned it, but others' comments could lead you to question that. And that's where the uncomfortableness and the context is absolutely different, right? So we were all teenagers. We all felt uncomfortable and embarrassed by our own self. And to Heather's point, everybody's embarrassed every day, right? But there's that level of what's happening around you that if you continue to stay in that environment, the uncomfortableness could grow and progress to being embarrassed and humiliated to the point where you try to be something that you're not because of what's around you. And some of that, the information is just not there. It's not many times it's not intentional, but I think maybe the or might do it, and the made to feel, even if it's on your own volition, made to feel that way, I think might perhaps be a nuanced way, and not just be more than just, oh, I'm a teenager that's uncomfortable in my own skin.
I would just suggest that revision, if we make it in that question, that we go through, because there's a couple other places where we have you felt, and it's probably more appropriate to change to made to feel.
Have you been made to feel? Yep.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm not entirely comfortable with the made to feel, because I think we're talking about sort of the conditions that are in our teaching and learning environments that perhaps started with a made to feel, there's some, it feels as if there's an intention on someone else's part to make one feel one of these ways.
The question already implies that by saying by another student.
Sorry?
The question already implies that somebody is bringing that condition upon you by saying it's basically another student has done this to you, is already built into the question.
Right.
But I think in terms of what we were talking about earlier, it's you might be made to feel uncomfortable, not because someone was trying to make you feel uncomfortable, but it's because of those cultures bumping into each other. So that it wasn't
what I was trying to get at, sort of like just the conditions that we want to improve that aren't necessarily because someone has done something with the intent to harm or the intent to do something that makes another feel badly.
Almost, have you ever felt uncomfortable, embarrassed, or humiliated on the account of your own academic ability, religion, etc.?
What about if we changed the reporting of this so that it said, have you ever felt, or I have felt the following way because of my family's income, uncomfortable, embarrassed, humiliated, because of, so that you can check either you were uncomfortable, either you were embarrassed, or you were humiliated. So
but the problem with that is it doesn't take away, like, is it your own issue? Or is it that somebody is making you that way?
Yeah.
I think if you separate out these three levels, then it does, because if someone is responding and saying, I feel uncomfortable because of my academic ability, like if it's three separate questions, uncomfortable is one thing, you scroll down, you're answering about embarrassed with the same list of issues, humiliated is a separate one, you're answering about the same issues. I think then, I guess what I'm concerned about is if we leave it all lumped together like this, that we're going to end up with data that we can't tease apart.
I think you're right. And I think we do both. We say, have you been made to feel, I have been made to feel the following way because of my academic ability, uncomfortable, embarrassed, humiliated. So that it's still like, I'm not just uncomfortable.
Well, you have to have a none of the above too.
Right.
Like,
And then
I feel great.
Above,
yeah.
not sure.
And does not apply.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
So that's
Jenny, is that what you were saying, Jenny?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't want us to end up with a bunch of data that, shows us that, citizenship status or family income, and we don't know if the person was uncomfortable, embarrassed, or humiliated.
Right.
Because if they were humiliated by another student, that we know that was an action. We know that was overt, whether it was through on social media, or it was in the classroom, or on the playground, or on the school bus. Being humiliated by someone else is not of your own doing.
Yeah, and so long as we put made to feel in there, it's not like I'm just embarrassed because of my academic ability. right? So it's like somebody made you feel that way, because that's how we were saying, like, oh, I'm embarrassed because my hair looks terrible, so I'm embarrassed because of my appearance. But if somebody says your hair is terrible, that's a different thing.
The other way to spin it is, do you want to ask it both ways to address sort of Stephanie's baseline question of, we might want to know if somebody feels uncomfortable because of their fill in the blank, regardless of whether there was an overt action that caused them to feel that way, because that suggests something about the default environment. And then there's the additional layer, which is, I'm having this problem because a third party has caused it to occur. So this might, it sounds onerous, but this might end up as 4 or 6 questions that ask it in slightly different ways.
Chris, what do you mean by default environment?
I mean, the way in which the environment is structured and exists. So when I walk into the classroom, and it might be because I've brought my own sort of personal identity with me and my expectations with me, I feel uncomfortable on account of being, you know, the only kid in my class who has, you know, reduced lunch or free lunch or something to that effect. And I feel self-conscious about that or uncomfortable about that. Or I feel uncomfortable because I'm the only kid who has used clothes and not, you know, brand new clothes, or whatever the basis is. Then that is not because another kid has done something, but it is an issue that exists that is going, it's the extent we're trying to identify barriers to learning and a safe learning environment, then whether or not somebody did it to you or not is less relevant than it exists, which is what I'm sort of hearing from Stephanie as what she's trying to get at.
Yeah, that's exactly
Yeah,
what I actually care about both.
Right.
So
Yeah,
what if there
I
was,
agree with
what
that.
if there was a follow-up question? This was an intent, like it felt like an intentional act, or not.
I guess then it makes it sound like that the goal is to report, right? I mean, and that, so that's not what we're trying to gather information, and yes, we do care very much if students are making each other feel uncomfortable, embarrassed, or humiliated. But we're not doing this so that we're going to launch an investigation because of the survey results.
And I think we have to, I mean, like, the perfect survey would be inherently imperfect because it would never end, right? It would, you know, continue to probe on every question in every dimension. I think we have to sort of balance, you know, how much we're sort of looking to collect, you know, and, you know, this year, and sort of what we're trying to do here.
B, you've had your hand up for.
I did, because I'm thinking to an incident with my son, not in Reading, like before we came here, where again, like I hear what everyone is saying, but you know, if we're looking to get data, if we're going to ask this question, and this question, for all the things we're asking, has the potential to have a lot of bearing in terms of the answers, right? So I'm very, like, I remember, like, my son was in a class where they were doing a competition of how many books you can read in a certain number of times over a course of a few months. And one of his best friends at the time, she was like a crazy reader, right? And she was like reading 3 times more than he was. And this girl was sweet as can be. You know, he asked her, how many books have you read? And she was way ahead of him. He came home and he was like, you know, I was embarrassed by her answer. Well, that had nothing to do with her. That had to do with his own shortcomings, right? So I don't want to portray that out. And so I'm concerned that no matter what, it doesn't matter whether it's uncomfortable, embarrassed, or humiliated, that can be self-inflicted, or it could be because of someone else. It's an emotional question. So maybe part of the solution for this question is, like, in my school, there have been times when I have felt, like, specifically related to the school environment, right? Maybe that's the way we get at this answer, because I just don't want us to either not apply the correct weighting to the answers or to overly apply the weighting to these answers.
Hey, Heather, what's the heading for this section? I know each section, uncomfortable incidents. Okay.
Sounds like a Netflix show.
Yeah.
And that gets at a third party causing discomfort. That doesn't get at the baseline sort of question.
Classroom environment.
Right.
Yeah, like what we're trying to do is make sure that everybody feels supported and respected. And it's like, it could be because someone did it to you, or it could just be because the environment that we're creating is not making that person feel respected. And
Might the section be relabeled discomfort in school or something like that, that is less about an overt action? If we're trying to also walk back the extent to which this relies on an overt action.
I think it should actually be labeled something less, I don't want to say negative, but I think all of the top, I think one of the pieces of feedback that I'm hearing from folks and from other board members, I've heard people use the word leading. I've heard people use the word sort of suggestive. And I've read some of the questions. I realize I'm coming very late to the party, and absolutely no disrespect and so much appreciation for all of the work that has already been done. That there is sort of a slant in some, could be taken as a slant in some of the headings. So I think to the extent that we can make the sections as sort of innocuous as possible, like if
Neutral.
it could just be
just number the
neutral, like
sections.
school incidents or school interactions or something like that, and then get into the, let the word uncomfortable come out in the question itself.
yeah,
Or just section
uncomfortable
11.
implies there's that there are people being made uncomfortable, which maybe it's just like school. How do you feel in school?
Yeah, and like the next one says unsafe, uncomfortable places. Instead of maybe just, we sound silly, but like locations in school or school places or experiences in school areas.
That's a good point.
Something to that effect. I think those are the small adjustments that will go so far to just, working really, having this be widely accepted in the community and gathering a lot of responses, which is the goal.
Yeah.
Does it? I mean,
Dana's had her hand up for a
I'm
while.
sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dana.
No, it's fine. I think even like school environment, like overall, like the environment of it. And I also liked, someone said before that it caused it versus made seems less on purpose. When you say it was like, something could be a cause that's unintentional, but when you're making something, you're doing it.
Negative.
So just those little, and I agree with the headings. I think we don't want to necessarily say, listen, I'm in the school. I know there are things happening. I've been there, but we also want their opinion without leading them in any way. But just, I like those general school environment. What's it like?
Would it make sense? I mean, like, would it make sense to actually put it all in terms of like what we're trying to do? Like, right. Feeling safe. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's almost like the school climate survey seems more like that in terms of those general statements.
And it that actually doesn't change the question as much as it's just like this section is about you being able to feel safe. And
right. It could be even,
but
beliefs. I don't know, depending on what the section is.
I wouldn't want to say like the safety one is different than like you could feel uncomfortable about your food choices because someone's making fun of your lunch, and still feel safe.
Right.
It's not like you don't feel like you're in danger. So we have to work on that wording, and we can take a look at the climate survey and have it align with that. However they phrase that heading. B, did you have another? Maybe not.
No, I did not.
So the other, he also had a comment on 17. I don't know if Randy's still on. So we can make sure that we're addressing his.
He is, he's on.
Okay.
Yep.
16, 17, diversity in learning materials. Okay. How do I bump this out? Oh, there we go.
Is that section 17 or question 17?
This is section 17.
I want to make sure you're looking at what he's looking at.
But the 11 was right.
I think that's it. I think that is the one.
Question 17 is another, have you felt uncomfortable, embarrassed, humiliated?
Randy, which one did you mean?
He may be away.
I'm here. I meant, well, I was looking at the middle school survey. If you guys
This is
can
the
hear
middle
me.
school.
Okay, so I thought it was question 17 that I was looking at, that again, as Jenny mentioned, started off with, have you ever been uncomfortable, embarrassed, and then humiliated, and then a large drop down of choices.
Okay, so it's the same. So perhaps we can, with the revisions that we just discussed, would apply for that also.
Yep.
Yep. Did anyone else have any other questions? I have some things that I've heard mentioned.
Heather, can I mention something about 15 since it came up a little bit?
Yep. Is it question 15, being treated differently?
No, I'm sorry. It says 15, in which of these spaces have you felt uncomfortable or unsafe?
So in the unsafe, uncomfortable spaces section.
I guess maybe it didn't really come up. Maybe I mentioned it.
Where is it?
No, you're too far. You're too far.
Sorry, this makes people get like seasick, right?
Just avert your
There
eye.
we go.
Right there. Stop. There you go.
I think it just to the same idea of, instead of this being in which of these spaces have you felt uncomfortable or unsafe, more of like a, choose your level of agreement with the following statement, kind like just convert it to a more open question that gives you sort of a spread of choices, because, and the last one, which is really saying everything is okay, is actually a double negative, like I do not avoid. And it's the last one.
Okay.
I'm just saying, like in the parent survey, all of the questions are choose your level of agreement with the following, and they give a broad spectrum of opportunities for responses, on a pretty wide gradient. I don't know exactly how to word it. This one just kind of brought up that,
Yeah, and
choose the response that applies to each of the following spaces.
And it also leads with the idea that there are unsafe and uncomfortable places.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Thank you.
I just have to say, my daughter works at the extended day at RES, and the little girl told her that she had to take a survey, and I'm assuming it was the climate survey, about where she feels unsafe in school, and she said it's the bathroom because there's spiders in there. So
allegedly
about the spiders.
I mean, I agree with her.
So I did want to address the gender identities question on here, because that seems to have gotten a lot of attention. There has been, and again, I've asked people to jump in on this, there has been something put out there that we've taken this whole survey from GLSEN, which is GLSEN, which is, GLSEN was a group of educators that formed because they found that gay and lesbian students were not being adequately protected, supported in schools. And I just wanted to say, we didn't just take these questions from them. We revised them. We thought about them. We rewrote them. But I did want to say, in terms of this, we're not putting these terms on this survey to indoctrinate people. We're putting these terms on this survey because we have these kids in our schools. We have trans kids in our schools. We have people who are questioning in our schools. So it's not a matter of, this is a political thing. This is allowing our students to find themselves represented on a survey that's about inclusion. And I want to say also, like we had the results reported to us a few years ago from the survey, a pretty extensive survey done by the ERCCC that showed that there was a really high rate of suicidal ideation and self-harm in our schools. And this is from the Trevor Project. that suicide is the second leading cause of death among young people ages 10 to 24. And LGBT youth seriously contemplate suicide at almost 3 times the rate of heterosexual youth. They're 5 times as likely to have attempted suicide compared to heterosexual youth. And of all the suicide attempts made by youth, LGBT youth suicide attempts were almost 5 times as likely to require medical treatment. Suicide attempts by LGBT youth, and this is, I'm reading from there because this is not addressing trans kids. And I'll get to that in a second. And questioning youth are 4 to 6 times more likely to result in injury, poisoning, or overdose that require treatment from a doctor or a nurse. In a national study, 40% of transgender adults reported having made a suicide attempt. 92% of these individuals reported having attempted suicide before the age of 25. And this, I want to speak to the idea that we should leave this up to families to discuss, because that's awesome. I hope families are discussing these things and telling their kids that, you know, to be respectful and to celebrate people's differences. But LGBT youth who come from highly rejecting families are 8.4 times as likely to have attempted suicide as LGBT peers who reported no or low levels of family rejection. 1 out of 6 students nationwide, grades 9 to 12, seriously considered suicide in the past year. And then this is another report, I think this is from March 3rd. This is from Forbes magazine. It says the numbers are stark, worrisome, and should set off alarm bells. 52% of all transgender and non-binary young people in the US seriously contemplated killing themselves in 2020. More than half thought it would be better to be dead rather than trying to live with rejection, isolation, loneliness, bullying, and being targeted by politicians and activists pushing anti-trans legislation. So I want to be very clear that this is not indoctrination. This is not something that we can leave off of a survey like this. We are doing this because we have these kids in our schools, and we have heard from these kids that they did not have even like the proper terminology to use when they were going through our schools. So I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on that.
So I also just want to clear up one misconception, or I think a piece of information that is getting a little bit confused. This idea that there's a glossary for these terms. That the PDFs for the drafts of these have been posted. So you can see the drafts. There is no glossary of terms related to this question. I think it was brought up, and I believe it was brought up in a meeting and we talked about it, but there was never a decision to add a glossary to those terms. So I just wanted to clear up that misinformation or miscommunication so that everyone
There is a bit of a
that
glossary in the Easton and Reading policies on gender identity. So these terms are in our policies right now.
Which was passed in like May of 2017.
Yeah. Dana.
And in the middle school, these terms right now are probably some of the most important questions. I just the shift and I'm happy and the kids feel more comfortable and are, you know, but the amount and the more we talk about in the middle school, the more these students feel accepted. I think that question is huge in the middle school.
Thank you. Jenny. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry.
Yeah, there you go.
I think it's important to distinguish between, like, I'm hearing opposition kind of in buckets. Like, I hear people who are completely against DEI work. I hear people who don't want the survey, you know, are uncomfortable with the survey. I hear folks who are uncomfortable with different aspects of the survey, and I feel like they're kind of being lumped together. And I think for this particular aspect of it, at least for me, is the one that I think people are responding to the most strongly. From a parenting perspective, from a should it be taught in the schools perspective, I don't think folks are reacting to discussions of race, reacting to discussions of religion, for, educational differences. I think this is the one that is coming up as this is something I want to discuss with my kid in when I feel it's developmentally appropriate, in language that I want to use with my child when I think they're ready. And that's where I think some of the crux of the issue is. So to the extent that we can see it from, this one is so hard, because for some students and families, this is a matter of life or death. And for others, this is they have very strong family or religious beliefs that are going to possibly turn them away from participating in gathering this information when they might have valuable things to contribute in the other sections. And I'm certainly learning. Like, Devin has shared things with me, Dr. Harrison has shared things with me that are helping me to understand things from different points of view. But I'm just wondering if there is some way that we can, Devin and I were talking about this, the idea, like when you're going to watch a movie or read a book or consume any kind of media that might contain something that's considered sensitive, right? We put labels on it. We give notice. We let people know, hey, this, there's topics of gender and sexuality, heads up, you might want to sit with your kid. Like, parental guidance suggested is not an uncommon thing in our society. And I don't think that needs to be taken as, we don't care about these students, we don't want to gather these information, we don't want them, we want to just sweep it under the rug. We want to do it in a way that we can get as much information from our community as possible, in a way that doesn't further alienate a different group of folks who may see this differently. And I'm making any sense whatsoever. This question about, right, that contains these terms that the terms about gender and sexuality, they're at the very beginning of the survey. So if you did want to respond to anything about any of these other, marginalized groups, but maybe not have your 10 or 11-year-old, incoming middle schooler to be exposed to these by taking the survey, is there a way that we can section it somehow? Or maybe just alert folks to areas of the survey that do contain these sensitive topics? I'm sorry, I realize I'm kind of going on here.
No, I see, Susan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I mean, as far as gender, it's a question that is asked in all surveys, and it's not, I feel like this is the biggest problem. It's not a sensitivity. This is the reality. And our children are various different genders beyond cisgender, male, female. And we have to start acknowledging it. We can't pretend that they're not there, that they don't exist, because they do. And every time that they're not acknowledged, that's causing harm to them. So trying to work around it, that people that don't agree with people for who they are, I mean, honestly, I just feel like it's their problem.
It isn't what I said, though. And that's where I feel like people are kind of hearing things that aren't there.
Yeah,
I didn't say anything about disagreeing or not acknowledging. I'm trying to respect the families and folks who are taking the survey who maybe don't want this to be exposure number one, but would like to express information about some of the other questions that are in this. I mean, I have had people say to me, I will not have my child take this survey. They're going to opt out because the vocabulary that we're stating as fact is fine, but maybe it's not the time for their kid to be, I don't know. Maybe I'm not expressing myself clearly,
Jenny,
but I think that
if I can just give, so I have 2 6th graders. I think the youngest age that we would ever see doing this is an 11-year-old, towards the end of their 6th grade year. I had them look at this so I could gauge their actual reaction to this and understand where are they at. I mean, just as a parent, parental guidance suggested, I was parentally guiding, and sort of they went right through that question. Both of them were just like, yep, easy, next. And they didn't pause there for any time, but I was there in case they did, in case they said, hold on. And I don't know, I feel like as a sixth grade parent, I think a lot of sixth grade parents would have that attitude towards this. And that's exactly what we're facilitating, you know, through the structure and the way that this is. Any sixth grade parent who says, I want to sit with them, yes, please do. Please do that.
So
yeah, B, go ahead.
So Jenny, is yours, I just want to make sure I understand this, is your suggestion that these front loaded demographics be moved to the back? Perhaps that way we ensure that we're at least capturing data from, you know, from those parents who aren't comfortable having this right up front.
Yeah, I don't know what the best answer is, because I don't want putting it at the end even to be taken as offensive. Do you know what I'm saying? But I think ideally it would be nice for there to be a way to sort of compartmentalize some of this, maybe in a way where you can just, and again, not a warning, not some big, scary, awful thing that is in any way denigrating to anyone, but at least if there is a point at which you could participate in the bulk of the in several sections of the survey, and then be alerted to the topics in the remaining part and say, you know, please continue if you'd like to continue. If you would like to submit at this point, submit. You know, just so that it doesn't, if it's embedded and woven throughout, then it's not really possible to, I'm having a really hard time.
I do want to just say one thing, that these words are right here on my screen right now. They're in the Easton and Reading gender policy, for one thing.
For adults.
Right. But and I also want to be very clear that, like, these kids, their first exposure to the idea of a non-binary kid is the non-binary kid who's in their class. So, like, I don't want to feel like we've talked about putting it in some sort of if you want to answer questions about gender and gender identity, click here. But that's like saying, like, it's not appropriate for people to hear about this, and we've got little kids, like we've got like actual little kids in the elementary school that they are on this. They can look at this, and their families can look at this and be like, oh my gosh, here's my kid for the very first time ever. I'm seeing this. And it's not, you know, it's like we on every single survey, as Susan was saying, it's put your gender. And I've also heard, oh, it's not appropriate to talk about gender in school. We do it all the time. And if we're not going to talk about gender in school, we're not going to have boys' bathrooms and girls' bathrooms. Are we just going to have bathrooms? Are we going to have just lacrosse and not boys and girls lacrosse? It's like we talk about gender all the time, but we only allow for like a percentage of the kids to even participate in that conversation. And I think that we could put something in the email that goes home to parents, say, hey, there's going to be some questions. Here's some terms you might want to know. But I know that you don't, you know, I know that you want, and I completely respect this and I agree, I want as many people to participate in this survey as possible. I also don't want to put these kids who, as I said before, are at risk. And like you said, like their lives are at stake. And I would rather have some parents of outgoing sixth graders have those conversations with their kids and then take the survey, or choose to skip that section, than put these kids even more at risk. Like I'm worried about those kids more than I'm worried about the discomfort of some parents who have the option to skip that question.
I think you've made huge strides just with even the description, and Devin shared it with me earlier today, just with the purpose of the survey. because I think it's clear that we're prioritizing trying to find those, get information from those groups of students that are maybe not having the common typical experience, positive experience, feeling more marginalized. It's just, if some way of alerting, whether it's in the beginning or in the survey, I don't know. I just am trying to balance wanting long-term meaningful success with all of these initiatives and not having folks that have expressed concern feel like you're just like basically kind of like you're just saying, like, I really don't care about them. I want to hear from
that
you,
is
but
not what I said. I didn't say I don't care about them, but I'm not worried. I'm not worried for their lives.
worried about, right?
But I'm not worried for their lives.
So, but I do think we have this opportunity so one, I think it's important because I do think this has been confusing, is that before the survey even goes out to students, an email will go to their family with the full survey attached with a description of the survey. So the family has the opportunity to preview the full survey as the student will take it. And I think making sure that families know they should preview the survey, that they have the opportunity to like within the survey, skip questions, so that if they never want their child to see, and again, if for that family, if they don't want their family to see a question about, I don't know, curriculum stuff, they can skip that. They can skip that question. So I do think there's opportunities for that to happen, for families both to see the survey and to, kind of similar to what John talked about, like strategize how the right way to take the survey is for if they decide to take the survey, because it is optional and they opt in, right? If it's the right thing to do for their family, then they have options as a family to strategize how to take that survey that best fits kind of their family situation.
And the outgoing sixth grader piece, I think, is really important for people not, like, I hear you saying it, I've heard it in previous meetings, but for people to understand the timing of it, because you've already been so thoughtful and listened to feedback and, not giving it to fifth graders any longer. And you're talking about the end of sixth grade. And, so all of those things I think will really help people be on board and participate.
I just had a comment that related more to the stats that Heather cited probably 10 minutes or so ago. Not as much to the most recent conversation, but a couple of years ago, we got the data back from that ERCC Search Institute. And hearing the numbers that Heather was putting out there was, gut wrenching. And, at a much lower level, we heard from the students at Barlow stating that I think it was like 90% felt like the town doesn't care about them. And we were all kind of tapped back in our chairs like, oh my gosh, well, what? So to me, this initiative is a way to show students, all of our students, that we care about them. We want to know more about what's going on, whether it's an uncomfortable incident or a humiliating incident. We care about them. And I feel like that's the whole purpose behind this survey, and why I feel it's just great work, and I'm excited about it. And I hear what everyone's stating here, right? It's hard to put this together in exactly the right way, but I feel proud of what we've done over the last couple of months. And this is, as I said, a way of showing these kids that we do care about them.
I also want to point out that at John Reed, there's like a Gay Straight Alliance club. So these kids, they're like and there's fifth graders in that club. So in terms of both the gender question and the sexual identity question, this is something that's like very much a part of the world that these kids are in. Devin, you had your hand up.
Oh, that was from a while ago. I just forgot to take it down. Winning. Thank you. Sorry about that.
And then B.
Wait, sorry. I forgot to put my hand down.
Okay. I said, Cheryl, you had your hand up for a while. Did you?
Oh, no, I was just going to say pretty much what Devin said, that there's an option. Families, the way during the Region 9 meeting last night, we talked a little bit about the process by which, this would be communicated to students, and that like similar to the climate surveys and other surveys that parents would be notified beforehand. So that could be a way for them to preview the questions beforehand and either have their child skip questions or et cetera. So there is that way to do that without necessarily changing some of the questions and creating a different issue of making certain kids feel like they're diminished by having their question put to the end, even though it's probably not intentional, but they could very well feel that way.
Yeah, and I also want to be very clear that I completely understand parents who have not had these conversations with their kids being like, I don't want it to be the school that's telling me to have these, or when I'm supposed to have these conversations. And so I think that's why we made, for the 6th grade, it's opt-in, right? Devin, do you want to speak to that?
So it's opt-in for all grade levels 6-12.
But there was something about the 6th grade also, in particular.
So we had discussed before. I think we had a better understanding of. There's like some Connecticut lawyer who's not me, because I'm not one, would be able to say this better than me. But in Connecticut, the way that, because of the type of survey this is, all families grades 6 through 12 will kind of go through that process we talked about earlier, which is they will receive an email explaining the survey. They will receive the full survey so they can preview the survey, and then they will opt in to the survey. And that's when they're the survey would be sent to those families or those children who opt in to the survey, for it to be done at home virtually.
Susan.
Yeah. I just had a question too on the survey itself. Say a student didn't go all the way to the end and click submit. Would that information still be saved? Like, would it still be recorded? Okay. Because that's another.
Yes, because you can skip questions. That's right.
Okay. Okay, good. Because I think one of the reasons it's so important too to have demographic information up front is because a lot of information is within that and the experience that goes on after. So if that information is collected at the end and they drop out before then, you could be missing some really important information.
Chris Parkin.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of first acknowledge the feedback from lots of folks that have helped sort of put a fine point to some of the concerns and see if we can resolve those to get to a collaborative result here. And also question sort of the what comes next on the basis of this feedback. Is this a referral back to the working group to consider the discussion tonight and come back to this group with a recommendation sometime between now and the 25th on the anticipation this goes to the 3 boards on the 25th? Or is there another sort of process in mind for how to get from point A to point B at this point?
Can I ask a clarifying question, Chris?
Yeah.
You know all the procedure-y things. If we were, as a working group, to take these surveys and make the recommended changes that were made, send them out ahead of time for the full 3 boards to review, could we vote on it without the committee meeting again to reapprove the surveys?
Well, a quorum of this committee of the voting members will be at the tri-board. So theoretically, we could
meet right before.
Right. In theory, you could receive the report of the working group at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock on the night of the tri-board for the purpose of then revising the recommendation. The cleanest way to do it would be to have the working group come back to the committee and the committee to make a clean recommendation. Alternately, I think the committee could probably move now to direct the working group to make changes in line with the discussion tonight and bring those forward to the tri-board. But from a process perspective, I think it's cleanest if the task force has a clean recommendation. And right now it sounds as if the recommendation from a month ago is going to be revised. And I think it makes sense to, even if it's a short meeting for the purpose of accepting the changes, I think we should do that sometime between now and Tuesday, provided that gives the working group enough time to have a considerate reflection of, I think I have 3, 4, 5 different topics that we're kind of hit on tonight.
Yeah, and those would be fairly easy changes. It's just really tweaking some words and then having the, the different breakdowns for the.
And I think there's value to not trying to bottom out on the language at 9:15 while we're all sitting here on Zoom. I think sleeping on it for a lot of people is going to be helpful to getting to a better result.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there any other feedback though? Because it's like that, like by the time we have a week, so to get the working group together, make changes, and then meet one more. I just want to make sure that we're addressing folks' concerns.
Devin, I emailed, and these were a couple of comments, minor comments from Region 9, and some of them were on the middle school survey. So I'll defer to the respective representatives on the middle school survey to address, on middle school boards to address appropriately. But there were a few comments we emailed over, and I think you also, the working group also, at least I know you and Heather certainly have that deck that was presented at Region 9, but they were minor comments. So, but just a reminder that we did receive a few. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. And to any other board members who are watching this, the exciting replay, get us here. If you got questions, comments, get them to us quick. Because here's the other thing. I mean, this can't wait another, this is meeting number 4. And I also want to say to all the people who have worked really, really hard on this, thank you so much. I appreciate the thoughtful work that was put into this, and to all the members of the task force who have now sat through 4 meetings about this. Thank you. And it's just part of the, the work of steering a giant ship with a lot of different people on it. Okay, any other questions, comments on that? Is this just this? That's we're the only ones left? One screen. Okay, public comment. Are there any members of the public still here? Yes, Tracy Darmfall. You have to tell me your address. Oh, there she goes.
Okay, hi, 9 Archers Lane in Reading. I have a junior and 8th grader at John Reed and a 3rd grader at RES, so we like to spread it all out. And I would have no problem with my 9-year-old taking the gender section of the survey. My 8th grader is a part of the Alliance Club, which is why I sort of said the middle school, 6th grade, 5th grade, the Alliance Club is there, and that is all has been discussed. And if parents are going home saying that this stuff is not discussed, it's been discussed. And I think it shouldn't be something that's put at the back of a survey. If there are 15, 20, 30 families who decide that they don't want their children to take that because they're offended by it, that's fine. Because if there's probably one kid who sees themselves recognized on this survey and they get to check that box and they're proud to check that box, that is a win. And that's one kid. And there's might be 30 families. Also, think about, because I know how I discuss with families who I know my daughter's friends with, and I don't mention certain aspects. I don't ask about stuff. So the at-home survey, you got to realize you're going to have a parent looking over their shoulder. What box are they going to check? How honest are they going to be? In my house, my kids know. We've got love is love all over the house. Certain houses might not have that. And that's something I think you guys need to realize when you get those surveys back with the at-home surveys, is how honest is that child able to be? Not to mention, there's families that, not everybody has mom and dad. There could be mom and mom, dad and dad, and all that. You have to recognize that the child might be straight, but their parents might not be. And maybe they don't want their parents at the back of a survey. So I think that's something that might just need to be pointed out, because anybody who's sitting here saying, I don't want my child to take that survey, that's not discussed. That's discussed. That's starting at 5th grade, starting earlier than 5th grade. And they walk right in the Alliance Club. Hey, it meets on Wednesdays, so it's there. That language is used. So, but thank you guys for your work. My kids will happily take the survey.
Thank you, Tracy. Any other public comment? None. Okay. I got an email that was asked to be added to the record. Do I read it, or can I just add it in as part of the minutes?
If this is the same email that is categorized as being signed by 15 folks, I would object to it being entered into the record because it's not actually signed by 15 folks.
Okay.
It's not signed at all.
Okay. And then a task force member comment. Yes, Jenny.
First, I just wanted to say thank you again for indulging my feedback and comments tonight. I know you guys have worked really hard on this and a lot of long hours. And you're all very brave sitting in these seats for as many months as you had talking about these really hard topics. I just want to close with saying, you know, even in the public comment that was just made, I just really take issue with people kind of continuing to sort of demonize or put words in people's mouths when they're talking about an opinion or a concern that doesn't fully 100% jump on board and align with everything that's in this survey. You know, even just everybody's on a different continuum of development and understanding. Every child is on a different continuum of development and understanding, and expressing concern or trying to take into account varying perspectives and viewpoints doesn't mean that someone takes offense to the topics or doesn't think that they are important. You can have a viewpoint with your child or your family about these issues and not, to use a double negative, not be unsupportive of the work. You can really truly just be looking at the wording, the order, the perspective, and be truly trying to get as many people to participate as possible and have the long view in mind. Anyway, I will just continue to try to advocate for that viewpoint in these proceedings. Thank you.
Dr. Harrison.
So Heather, when you started the conversation about the survey, you talked about the purpose of the survey, which I wholeheartedly agree with, and I appreciate you making that really crystal clear in tonight's presentation. One of the things that I think is important to note that while it's not the purpose of the survey, I've been referring to this as a really important byproduct of the survey. And that is that many of our students who may not already feel seen will see themselves in this survey. And I think that there is such a power to visibility and representation. And I will say it's why I'm most proud of this work because I just am looking forward to the positive impact that it has on students who will see themselves and their experiences and even their concerns represented in a really explicit way. And I think that there is something really great about that. And so that's the only thing I wanted to add. And I think that I try to make that distinction because we're not using, it's important to note we're not using the survey to teach. We are actually in the business of teaching and learning, and none of us who hold any kind of credentials would ever say the best way to teach anything is through a survey. Like, oh, let's teach them about fractions. Let's survey them with fraction questions. That's not how teaching works. But I do think that that this has an opportunity to say that the experiences that all of our students are having in schools, that it really does matter. We really are listening, and we are interested in thinking about ways to do this better. And I think that that's a great message that we as adults have the opportunity to send to our young people. And that's it.
Thank you. Susan?
I just wanted to thank you, Dr. Harrison, for saying that. It means so much to have that support from you. It truly does. I mean, having a child that's non-binary in elementary school, it's my everything to know that they are seen and accepted and respected just like everyone else's children. So thank you for that.
Any other task force member comment? I just want to say, Jenny, this is brave jumping in here like this with 2 feet into the deep end, and that you are not indulged, you are appreciated. And I thank you for everything that you've contributed here. It's really valuable and it's really important. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn? No?
Sure.
All right, Chris, Cheryl, and the meeting is adjourned at 9:23. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Heather.